Hi everyone, welcome back to iProject Education, and this is going to be our third lecture, and we will cover loop and iteration for this lecture. So I used this picture. So what is a loop and how to implement loops in a programming world? So we will discuss some common loop or iterations. We'll discuss the for loop, the while loop, and we'll cover a little bit about for in loop. This will be used for collections specifically in Python. And I assume, or like as far as I know, some other programming languages will also have for in loop, but it's not universally true for all the programming languages. So it's just as a extra point for this lecture. But for loop and while loop, almost all the programming languages I've known so far will have these two types of loops. So okay, we could go through our lecture note for today. And okay, great. So normally we want to iterate atoms in a collection. So as a review, a collection would be a collection of different types of values or a collection of the same types of values. This could include list, array, linked list, or like dictionaries, maps, etc. And we could use the loop to iterate through the items. So as you could see, in my sense, it have some like very close correlation between the iteration and loop. So I will cover them together. So first, the first type of loop we will discover today is the for loop. And I will use the iteration example to go through the for loop. Hopefully this makes sense. So if you want to use for loop to iterate the index of the items, um, oh, sorry, it's like if you want to use the for loop to iterate the items in the collection, normally you will iterate through the index of the items. And this is another very strange common thing in programming is that the index starts from 0. So this means the first element is with index 0, which is not common sense in reality. So hopefully you remember that. This means like the first element is index 0, the second element is index 1, and etc. So if you want to extract the element by using the index, we want to do the collection name, the bracket, and index. So let's have an example to make it more concrete. So I will use the variable definition that we covered in our first lecture here. So remember, this means that we have a variable named x, and we assign a list to the x. And a list of collection, so it could store different values. And in Python specifically, the list could store different types of values. But here I use the same type of values, which is integers. And the values are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But remember, the index starts from 0. So the index is from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So this means that if we want to access the first element of the list, which is 1, we will use x bracket 0. And if you print x bracket 0, it will give you 1. Hopefully this makes sense. So how do you use for loop to iterate through the items? We will use for I in range, and this is specifically for Python. We will have different structures for different programming languages. I think we will cover Java in the Intro to Java series as well. But for here, just remember for I in range. And for I in range 0, 5. So why is 5 here? Remember we discussed like this one is going to be with index 0, this one is index 1, this one is index 2, this one is index 3, this one is index 4. So why here is a 5? This is because the range function starts from the first element inclusively and exclude the last element, and with the step 1. So this means that range 0, 5 will go through 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we want to print xi, which means we will print x0, x1, x2, x3, x4, and it will give us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hopefully this makes sense. If it's not, feel free to post in the comments and I could reply to the comments. And okay, this is a little demo for how to implement for loop in other programming languages. And I think this is true for Java or C++, or they have similar structures like this instead of using the for I in range function. The second type of loop that we will discover today is while loop. And if you want to use while loop to iterate the elements in a collection, you could also iterate the index. And a common form is while condition. And condition is a statement that could be evaluated to be true or false. At first, we want this condition to be true so that we could go inside the while loop. But we want to update the condition later and gradually make it to be false so that we could stop or we know when to stop our while loop. So we also have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as a list. And I equals to 0. This means that we assign number 0 to a variable named I. Why we want to start from 0? Well, because the first element is with index 0, and we kind of mimic the for I in range 0 here. And well, I is smaller than 5. This is hopefully obviously a condition because I could be smaller than 5 or I could not be smaller than 5. So it could be either true when I is like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and it could be either false when I is like 5, 6, 7, 8, etc. And we also want to print x bracket I. This is just for extract the elements in the list. And this step is very crucial because we want to update the condition so that the condition would gradually to be false eventually. So hopefully you could see that if I increment I each time, then at some point it will be greater or equal to 5 so that the condition will not be met and we will not go inside the while loop anymore. So this is equivalent to for I in range 0, 5 because we only go through 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 and we print 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here. So be careful about infinite loop. Infinite loop happens when you did not increment or you did not update the condition successfully so that the condition is always evaluated to be true. So if you just do like while true print high, then you could see like there are so many highs and you don't know when to stop because you never change the true to be false. And at some point you will encounter an error, but I think that depends on your system. Yep. So okay. And this is specific for the iteration of a collection, which is be careful of using index to access the element. This is because the index can be out of range. So as mentioned earlier, if a collection, for example, the X we used throughout this lecture, has 5 elements, then its index should be 0 to 4 inclusively. Any other indices that are out of this range will cause the index out of range error. So if you do like x5, it will cause index out of range error because the maximum index you could get for a collection with 5 elements is 4. However, in Python, is specifically different than other programming languages is that you could use negative index. This simply means you iterate from the end of the collection to the start of the collection. So if you use -1, this is equivalent to x4, which will give you the value 5. But because this is not common for other programming languages, this is only for Python. So I wouldn't worry this too much. But in other programming languages, or maybe most programming languages, if you use negative indices for a collection, it will cause a index out of range error. And as promised, we will go through a little bit about for loop. So because we've encountered some errors like index out of range, hopefully you could see that if I could access the element directly without using the index, that will make life easier. So this is why we introduce for in loop. So you can simply use for item in X print item and this will give you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In this case, you will not be confused by, oh, I need to start my index from 0, and you wouldn't worry about, oh, whether my index is out of range or not. But not all programming languages support this type of for in loop, but at least Python do that. And loop in general sense. Well, I know that I introduced the for loop and while loop and for in loop using the iteration with connection, but they don't have to be necessarily together. So you could use loop in a general sense because loop does not have a correlation with the collection. Loop only means you want to go through the same thing for multiple times. So you could do like print x square bracket I for like 5 times. You could also do print high for 5 times using the for I in range 0, 5. You could also do like maybe print hello world, etc. So loop is just a tool for you to um, evaluate the same statement for multiple times. It does not have to be part with the collection or iteration or access to elements. But I'm talking about this all together is because I think they, like for most of the time, you want to iterate through a collection, you will use the loop as a tool to help you. So yeah, I think this kind of conclude this lecture note. And as always, if you want to do some self-check, feel free to check the Google form in the comment. And great job. I know it's a little bit longer lecture, and we've introduced some confusing concepts in this lecture. So if you have any things to note, feel free to post in the comment and see you in lecture 4.